Hello, everyone. Yeah, I think so, because I'm probably the third one of the CHERISH speakers. 'Cause I know Toby's speaking later on the year more about the methodologies and stuff, and I'm going to of CHERISH, and I'm Sandra's talking about the underwater environment. I think next year work there. So I'm a maritime archaeologist. I'd like to just talk about our coastal sites that we record and try and relate them around the North Atlantic, kind of trying to bring them in as even as far in the later periods as North America as well. So I thought I'd just start off. It was Friday the 13th, so you can see the scary cliff erosion, and 20 meters. I just thought it is the superstitions that I want to bring in here. Is why I'm bringing it in first. This circular structure is known as a fairy ring locally. Archaeologists would know this as a ring fort. Probably the first millennium settlement. Dispersed farming settlements. And you see how close it is to the gradually getting closer to the shore. It's about 30 meters in width as we look at these 19th century, early 20th century maps, and bringing in the superstition in the way, because the local people, they call it the fairy ring. The farmers' cattle would never graze in it, and they think anybody that actually disturbs it will die along with their family. So what is CHERISH? Well, it's an acronym. It's Climate, Heritage, Environments, Reefs, Islands, and Headlands. We were looking at the historic, the climate, how climate change is affecting our heritage, and we're engaging local communities and on how they see their heritage changing. That's how, and it's an EU-funded project originally, but it's got an extra 2 years, bringing us up to 2023 now. And the environmental, our EPA certainly report last year says we're going to have, by the middle of the century, we'll probably have 1 to 2 degrees increase in temperatures in Ireland, and some probably more dry periods and heavier precipitation. A decrease in wind speeds is believed, though that they're not sure as that. It depends how the storms track across the Atlantic towards us, whether they go to the north and south of us. So there will probably be expected to be sea level rise and more flooding from this heavy precipitation. So what we've been experiencing recently in May, we had certainly when we're doing our excavations over in the west coast of Ireland, you can see in May, Met Éireann, our meteorological service, was reporting above average rainfall. You see there's Sandra, the director, in the bottom right. She's giving an interview to Nationwide during this one of these heavy rains we had which was quite unusual for May for us at that time to have storms. To say this is the first millennium promontory fort here. You can see the banks, the ditches. The castle there is second millennium, that was built later. You can see there's 2 banks and ditches there. And the weather's not always that bad, because you can, in July we actually had the maximum temperature broken with tropical nights reported over here in Ireland. So unfortunately, we weren't excavating at that time. Just comparing the Ferreter's Castle there with some of the 19th century views, and you can see certainly there's been a lot of erosion. That's why we chose it as a site to excavate on in these areas, as eroded away since the geologist George Dunoyer investigated there drew that. It was published in 1856. Two areas of severe erosion. I know Toby's going to cover a lot of the methodology, but because I'll be discussing, you'll see some of the images and stuff later. I think I'll just briefly go through it. Toby's the aerial archaeologist from the Royal Commission over in Aberystwyth in Wales. So he trained Rob and Gary there, our surveyors, to do the aerial photography over in Ireland. Just an example from Dalkey Island there on the east coast of Ireland. And we do the traditional recording of the cliff edges. For the more steeper cliffs, we recently got training in rope rescue operation. That's Paul. He's an ex fireman, and he also does rope rescue. So he set up all the ropes to look at these the more dangerous cliff sections that are eroding away. And here's Rob flying the drone over, and he's just above an eroding spoil heap from a 19th century mining site in Waterford. And Louise there from the Royal Commission over in Wales, she's doing magnetometry. in landward of a promontory fort, so just see what areas in the future are possibly going to be eroded. And yeah, the excavations that we had over in West Kerry there, that's the hut site from the first, we believe it's the first millennium, waiting for dates to come back on that there, and to work out the date of that hut site that's being excavated. And also from the University of Aberystwyth, more of our Welsh colleagues, there's Patrick and Sarah, they're more paleo-environmentalists. They're coring into a bank there of a promontory fort in Waterford. To get when the date that's, if it's luminescence dates or radiocarbon dates to date when this fort was built, and also to record the previous storms in the lower areas. They're doing some cores as well in wetter areas that we can then maybe close to the coast, so we can see when storms kind of breach barriers, and even show us when sea level rose. That one we got about 4.5 meters depth of peat before we hit clays, and the height above land there is about 2 meters, so we were below sea level. So just an example of a province of Dunbeg here. It's in Kerry as well. You can see the erosion. There's the stone bank here. There's the hut site and an earthen bank in the top left. This has been happening quite a lot over the course of the project. It seems to be periodic. There was also a more big collapse in the 70s, but you can see in that bottom left the two examples. A picture from the mid 19th century where the entrance is to this fort. Nowadays we have to kind of go to the left, you know, as you walk down the tourists, because they can't enter the entrance anymore. The coast is just eroded all the way up to it now. And then again, you can see on the entrance of the top left, top right, you can see where the entrance has fallen away more recently, since we started the project in 2017. And you can see the fort there today is much more crescent shaped when you compare to when Dunoyer drew it in 1858, which is much more triangular in shape. And a lot of this is to do with, I think, with the increased precipitation. Is whether it is going to, it comes down the mountainside there, Mount Eagle. You might think it's an excavation. No, that's where that's the old path that you access the site with, and the water's just followed the path and eroded that and gone into the fort itself there on the left. And in the distance, you can see Valentia to the peninsula to the south, and Skellig Michael, UNESCO World Heritage Site. That's the view looking back there from the hut site, and let's point that out, the hut site there with Mount Eagle there, where Dunbeg is in the distance. So like they're trying to bring out the maritime perspective of both these new one promontory forts on both sides of Dingle Bay. You see the hut sites are cut in half there as well. That's what's eroding away. So what is a promontory fort? Well, it is generally thought to be Iron Age over in Wales, but most of the Irish examples that we seem to be getting dates from about the early medieval. So that's one of the reasons we want to date it. But they seem, well, obviously it's a promontory that's been cut off from the land by banks and ditches. With the example on the bottom left there from Woodstown, and Dunbeg there on the right, which actually has a stone bank and several more earthen banks and ditches as you go landward. These probably would have had wooden fencing along them as well to raise them higher. Another example here from the Woodstown, you can see where in 2018 we visited the banks here, and you can see this promontory fort on the top left. There's the banks and the ditches, and that was collapsed by by just a very recent visit that we paid there a couple of months ago. The differences, and from the base there, you can see that's looking up at this fort. And again, this seems to be from the increased precipitation. You can see within the joints and the rocks here there, the water has been infiltrating through and weakening this rock. So increased precipitation in the future is going to probably increase the erosion of these features. So why are they important? Because they're kind of out of the way of a lot of the previous where there's more development. You know, they're on the coast. They're not there on the promontories, not near any marinas or harbours. So there hasn't been that much investigation of these before, and they do seem to be quite a common feature, as we can see on the left there. There's an example, and they are badly eroding because you get hut sites on the actual islands as well. Which kind of suggests in the past that the islets offshore were actually connected to the land in the past. And with their actual extent, I want to show them they do extend from Shetland to the north of Orkney, all around the coast of Scotland there. Around Ireland, but mostly on the western coast, Wales, and then Brittany and to Galicia. So they do seem to be a common feature in these areas, which again brings in the maritime kind of links between these areas, and possibly same kind of groups of people, and they're kind of building some similar kinds of structure with that on the continent. So our investigation of them here, we see with the rope access, trying to record what is exposed and what has been recently exposed. It's probably been doing a larger excavation, and we can quickly record what is there using some photogrammetry and the notes that I'm drawing here as well. One of the artifacts, I was quite surprised to actually find some artifacts, but this has been interpreted by Toby as a slingshot stone. He seems to find them over in Wales, which is kind of tying in our forts over in Ireland to the Welsh forts, perhaps meaning because they're more dated to be Iron Age, so perhaps that they can be roughly the same time. This is another example of a slingshot stone I got from Donegal. But so they do seem to be much more common. I don't think people in the past realized what they were, and so that's why they probably haven't been saved. Toby's giving an example there of one of his drawings to show at a hill fort, showing how a slingshot stone would have been used. That's the fort I've just been showing you, the Woodstown fort there, and it seems to almost kind of look over a bay, as if there's been a landing place in the past. So it's an important access to the sea and from the sea. It seems to be over to, as if the slingshot stones does suggest their purposes could be, certainly in this case, could be for defence. The Woodstown fort there on the left, you can see all the erosional features. There's new arches have formed since the 19th century map there on the right, where Green Island was all one in the past, but you can see the arch had collapsed by the late 19th century there. And certainly where you can see the banks kind of continue a bit to the west, about 80 meters to the west in the top left there. So that kind of suggests there's been at least 80 meters of erosion in that area, cutting it. And then it would also suggest as well, when we look up the photogrammetry they put from the drone images together, there's even a hut site on Green Island. So it's giving us more information that suggests that the banks and the ditches there, so from the small promontory fort, were actually a much larger fort, about over 200 meters long, and a much more impressive fort in the past that is eroding very severely. I want to slightly move on a little bit to the east coast, so you can sit down and look at Dalkey Island. Is this just to the south of Dublin? It's probably associated sometime with Viking. So the Viking name is Dalkey. Anything ending with an A, like Salty Island to the south is Salt Island, Dalkey Island is Thorn Island, from Norse names. Here we have the bank and the ditch of the promontory fort in the right there. Without the dates from that actually is 6th century, so it'd be pre-Norse periods. And we also have medieval church and later periods as well. Here. The landing place itself, kayakers have found a Roman coin, so it is washed out from the beach there, and so these probably could have been used for a much longer time. That's just in front of the promontory fort on the island, and certainly the rabbit burrows brought up a late Roman amphora showed. So this ties us into the continent, probably from around the 6th century as well. In that area, they do think it came from North Africa, but I think more recent analysis showing probably more links to Spain, again, with where the other promontory fort areas are, certainly maritime links at that time. We move to the later Norman period from around the 12th century. A lot of mottes and baileys were built around Ireland. Here's one at Glascarrig here in County Wexford, just on the southeast coast of Ireland. The record, you can see it's lots of slumping down the cliff here, and you can see which is into the sea, which is exposing cliff sections just below the motte. And interestingly, there's pieces of flint, which does suggest that the Normans, certainly when they arrived, they're probably reusing older prehistoric sites as well, which may have been a rath or an old Neolithic grave, like Newgrange, or so that they built up and you reused it as a motte settlement. And another Norman town is on the south coast of County Wexford, and that is Clonmines. We were very interested in this site because the local farmer was worried about the friary from this medieval town. It was getting flooded quite often, and when it was last. So we wanted to investigate, how the increased is this going to be a bigger problem in the future? So it's quite a well preserved medieval settlement. There's some geophysics have shown you the whole town underneath the fields, and so there's some tower houses perhaps from the 14th century. The town boundary just kind of extends along that line of trees there. The levee dike, which seems to have been built probably from the older maps, it seems to be something there from about the 19th century, is kind of certainly channeling the river, and that would have affected certainly the meandering of the river itself. And so looking at some of the pictures, we can see so the accretion, which seems to be occurring in our recent picture that Toby has drawn in the bottom right. And we compare that with the 1967, that we can show that there is accretion happening as well, that just in front of the priory. This seems to be happening at the same time as more increased flooding as well. And also in that area, when we were looking around the meander of this estuary, you can see there's erosion just to the north there. The old ford, I've just marked that as well, which seems to extend across to the priory. And so certainly we've just been exploring that just last week, the erosion around that meander. In the past, the farmer said he was able to almost walk across the river there. So the farmer himself has been noticing a lot of the erosion. This is called the pill. The pill field is the name there, and pill is actually a word which links with like Cornwall and Wales across, because it means like a small harbour or a small creek. So it's quite, for maritime archaeology, it's quite interesting. This could have been where a lot of the boats landed in the past. And you can see the differences that we're picking up there. It's stone structures there, which Sandra's recording there on the right, and the difference in erosion has happened since we've been able to get back after 2 years. We weren't really able to get out much, so you can see how the erosion is increasing quite fast in this part of the coast. And we don't find that many artifacts in certainly of our earlier prehistoric sites, certainly the Norman periods here in the town here, where we got quite a lot of pottery in the top left, medieval pottery, roofing slates, and perhaps sharpening stones as well. We need to examine more, and some certainly industrial activity with the slag. There's burnt pot as well there in those bottom ones. So it seems something we'd like to in the future certainly do some geophysics, perhaps in that field. Moving back to the west coast there of Kerry, this will bring us into it's Smerwick Harbour, and this is the Dun-and-Ore site, and this ties directly with North America, because this is one of the when you actually will walk around it's a promontory fort. So what if it's prehistoric origins from the Iron Age into the early medieval period, but seems to have been castle being built later. Was later on top, and at the time, one of the exploration for the Northwest Passage up in Canada, they found some rock which they thought contained gold. So that's why it's called the Dun-and-Ore. That means Dun is fort and Ore is Irish for gold. So they thought this was gold ore that they found in Baffin Island there in Canada. So they were bringing this back to Ireland, well, back to England, but they had to stop for repairs in Ireland, in Smuggling Harbour in front, and they stored some of the this rock in this promontory fort. Unfortunately, it turned out it didn't actually have any gold in it, so a lot of the rock was abandoned. But you can still find it. They used it as ballast sometimes, and it's lying on the beach below. That's the black rock to the right there. I think the coal company went bust after that. The Dunanore is also quite famous as well for for a massacre that happened about 1578, so slightly later as well. But I'll show you can see that Dunanore just there, and that's it there. This is the Italian and the Italian and Spanish ships are joining a rebellion in Ireland. So the English have come up and they've put their own defences there as well to throw them out. And about 600 people were beheaded. After a siege of 3 days. The map there, the top right, that was drawn after the siege does. The accuracy is not there, but it does show a representation of how the coastline looks today in the past, and you can see a lot of the promontories, and a lot of these are marked as Iron Age or medieval promontory forts as well. So which we have been recording as well, and you can see the severity of the erosion with the stone walling there, and the ditch of that promontory fort there has eroded away to my right, and you can see even to the left of the stone wall behind me there is an arch forming. So yeah, so associated with these kind of links to North America as well, there was a lot of piratical activity going on. A lot of the coves of Cork and Kerry were useful for hiding ships, and so this was some evidence, perhaps from smuggling. The rock in front of us, in front of this narrow inlet here, and is the Carrick and Fiona. That means the rock of wine. So there's a wine to be smuggled here. With Ferreter's Cove is to the you can see in the bottom right. That's the normal landing place to the right of this promontory fort. And Ferret, this is where we did the excavation in Kerry just earlier this year. So Ferreter's Cove, you can see there. That would be if you were normally going to be landing your supplies. So this very narrow entrance here with the rock of the wine, so it suggests itself to be more of a smuggling entrance onto the promontory fort itself. We even point out there's an eroding the hut site there just in the bottom right as well. It's been sectioned away. And so the aerial view there, you can see how narrow and steep the sides are of this cove, but at the rock of the wine, and you can see there's more banks and ditches of the promontory fort. But there's also steps down, probably much later, probably tying into this period of the 17th, 18th century. And here's the steps themselves. We could just probably put the end of your feet in to climb up and down along the side of the wall from the landing place. You only be able to land there on very calm conditions. That's just showing the area of where those steps. It's about 11, 12 steps. You can just go up and down there from that landing place. So certainly by the late 18th, 19th century, the industrial revolution was happening with and so you're tying our sites into the more global archaeology. You can see from the copper mining, the resource, the mineral mining that was happening along the southern Waterford coast. It's one of the areas that we've been working at. This is you can see the boats landing. They would take the ore away from this coast. It's known as the Copper Coast. It's today because of all the evidence of the mining that you can see in the bottom left and the right, the engine house and the adit mines. And yeah, so a lot of this copper would have been sent off to Wales itself for smelting, and then a lot use in whatever, including the sheathing for all the ships at that time to help them from the Teredo worm for the world transport. Yeah, that's just some for the Geological Survey did some mapping, of coastal land at sea, the intertidal zone, and tying it into the near shore. the coastal and the intertidal zone, tying them all together. So that landing place there, from the top left, you see where the ore house, ore yard is in the center, is in the center there for the landing place. And even the bottom right there, you can see where they've actually even carved through, with the same mining knowledge, to allow the ships to come in themselves to be loaded up. And there would have been a tramway taking the ore down from the mine shafts. Interestingly, these seem to be in the same area as the promontory fort, as the Knockmahan promontory fort there on the left. There is has an ogham stone. That's so suggesting like this, the mining could be very old indeed. Ogham stones are maybe 4th to 6th century Irish writing. So yeah, they're mostly kind of carved into. You find them, and they mostly seem to say names of people. And so this is my land, or this is my ancestors' land, that I'm staying. And so it's only when you have people who can write, it's an important site. Yeah, so a lot of the adits around the coast you can see. This is into the cliffs, into this is actually the lead and silver mine here at along the Copper Coast. This is one of our promontory forts that we've been investigating, but you can see it's so eroded away. It's just a goat track to try and get up to it. We haven't been able to get onto it itself, but we've flown the drone around it. You can see from the top left picture the grass, and then there's been a landslip between our earlier views back in 2017 and our 2019 kind of views there. And I think this has all been exacerbated by the adit mining in this area. This has increased the erosion, because that happened in the 18th, 19th century. This is making the rocks here all very unstable. You can see from the our drone models the new slip there. I know, but that's quite recent. But you can then see the same kind of formation is also older slips. You can always get some stratigraphy of the erosion occurring here, and you could then say, and certainly say in the past, that it would have been easier to walk onto this island. It's known as Danes Island. That means that it's probably suggesting they think it's Viking, but it just means it's old. And it's and on the island there as well. It's got hut sites. We're inferring from the photogrammetry that we built up from the from the drone images. Sorry, where the perhaps trace of the banks and ditches as well. And also looking landward there, the magnetometry. So showing lots of ridge and furrow from the farming activities, and even the old fences and field systems, and then some other more intriguing features which might be adits or even perhaps circular raft or ferry ring fort that I talked to you about at the start. But here the local farmer calls that the castle field, as if there was something there in the past. And so we're trying to investigate so these during the meantime to see are they the remains of mining areas, and you can see the way they've eroded they're eroding into the sea as well. Only half of them might be left, or are they much older features? Just for the last site, I really want to kind of talk to moving probably more into the later 19th, early 20th century sites. I want to move back to the Ferreters Castle site in near there over in Kerry, where we're doing the excavation. That's Ferreters Castle promontory, just in the middle there. But below us in the foreground there, you can see this carved out more kind of mining areas, but this isn't for minerals such as in the Copper Coast. This is more for building stone. So they're carved into the rock here, and you get a lot of these graffiti. I've been recording here. Here we got Mr. O'Shea from 1920. And some trying hard to read it as well, but at least we're getting some of the dates come from the 19th century, as late 19th century, and this was bringing in probably tourism as well. This carving as well, with a cross on the top, that kind of just might show you our excavation there. And in the distance, there's Mount Brandon. It's one of the highest mountains in the island. It's named after Brandon the navigator, the saint who's meant to have sailed. Certainly set up monasteries in Wales, but there are some stories of him sailing much further afield, perhaps to Iceland. But that's probably following old traditional route ways. And so certainly as part of you can see the places that people would have stopped as they climb the mountain. It seems to be part of a tourist trail that people have drawn here from the early 20th century to climb Mount Brandon as well. So that seems to tie in with people here carving these graffiti at this site at Ferreters and the top of Mount Brandon there. And so the local farmer has said, oh, this was where fishermen used to come and used to stay, and they used to carve the name and fish off these rocks. And so here's the Royal Marines here in 1918. And but the other stories as well that other people say about it's where people before they emigrated, they used to go and carve their names here on the stone on the west coast before they emigrated. And this one here, to tie into North America again, this is from J. O'Sullivan in California in 11th of August, I presume 1929. So yeah, just to summarize there, I hope I try to brought up the kind of maritime feel of a lot of our sites as we and the links around the North Atlantic onto North America there, just and try to show that development and try to bring out show you we've collected quite a lot of the data. Now we want to certainly date and get that's outtake and write up a lot of the information. So that needs to be analysed. We've got the Welsh coming out again to do some more coring, I think, at Ferreters maybe next month or into October, and whenever they can get back out again. So we probably get some more dates off them. We've got some samples which we'll be sending off, and so to actually kind of date a lot of our promontory forts and see if they tie into that we've been excavating in sites, and see if they tie into other areas of Europe and the continent. As we're seeing the erosion, the different effects from the increased precipitation. And so thank you. Any questions at this time?